T converted can here. That will be an inside joke for those that were in this chat room of a different thing that I was in for a while. That like all the anyways, it's an inside joke. So if you weren't there, you won't get it. And if you were there, then you'll be like, that's funny. Anyway, so I'm gonna look at this video called "Atheists Have Faith That We Live in a God-Free Universe, Since They Have No Evidence That We Do" by the Reasonable Creationist. Oh, good. Okay, so I haven't even started the video, and there's so much to talk about already. You can't really be a reasonable creationist because creationism is an incoherent nonsense of non-science, pseudoscience, of completely misconstrued misunderstanding of actual science and evolution and all that stuff. So that's a problem. Of course, it's a a you too fallacy. Oh, you have faith. It's shifting the burden. It's not our burden to show that there isn't a God. It's your burden to show there is. Having evidence of a universal negative is not possible when that universal negative is one that can't be falsified. So you're asking for something that is impossible to give, just like if I asked you to give me empirical evidence of God, you wouldn't be able to do so because apparently, for some reason, there's no empirical evidence of God, nor is there any repeatable test. As far as a valid and sound argument, well, I doubt that this guy is going to have it. But let's play this video, and I will make fun of it. I will rebuttal. I'm going to play this video.
Atheists have faith that we live in a God-free universe, since they have no evidence that we do. Written by Scott Reeves. The atheist, despite the constantly shifting sands that comprise the ways in which he characterizes what it means to be an atheist, unarguably denies the existence of any gods, let alone the Christian God. At the very least, atheists argue that there can't ever be any evidence for an omnipotent being, because such a necessarily supernatural being is beyond the reach of science. But by denying God, atheists make the positive claim that we live in a universe where there is no God. Since we live in a universe where there is no God, the universe could not have been created by God. Alternatively, Christians make a different positive claim, that we live in a universe that was created by God, and contains a God. Whether God is in the universe, or transcends it, Christians make the claim that we live in a universe, with a creator God.
Okay, so a lot of issues here. It's interesting that some apologists complain about atheists changing what the word is. There's two different definitions of atheist. It's not that complicated, okay? There's the definition that there's no God, and then there's the definition that says lacking in belief in God. And either of those is valid. The thing is, when you say God, my first response is, what do you mean by God? Which God are you talking about? What is God? What do you mean by that? There's 1,000+ gods out there to choose from. Why would I think any of them exist? And why would I think yours exists without evidence? It's interesting that he says that it's supernatural, and that's why there couldn't be evidence of it in science. Well, yeah, by the definition of the word supernatural, there would never be any evidence of that ever. So that's a problem for you to deal with, not for me to deal with. As for making a positive claim I will gladly make a positive claim that Yahweh doesn't exist, which is a Christian God. Other gods, I don't know. I mean, I haven't checked into every single one of them. I doubt their existence, but I'm not willing to say no because I haven't thoroughly researched them like I did with the Christian God. So, maybe, but I haven't seen any reason to think that there are there. So, the burden's not upon me to show that they aren't. The burden is upon either the God itself to reveal itself to, well, not just me, because that's not enough for me. I would want it to reveal itself to all of humanity, but regardless, to show up in some way that is unmistakable, and or for the theist to produce some sort of evidence that God exists, specifically whatever God they're claiming exists. So he's already wrong that the burden is equal, but that's, a typical apologetic tactic.
Christians claim that we live in what I will call universe A, a godful universe. Opposingly, atheists claim that we live in what I will call universe B, a God-free universe.
Okay, once again, straw man. No, we don't claim that. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find an atheist that actually claims, that we live in a God-free universe. I mean, maybe somebody would say that. It wouldn't be me, but maybe someone. But you can't make this broad brush assertion about atheist claims without showing any proof that atheists do make this claim. And of course, there's no proof here. No study, here's what atheists believe. Here's at least the majority of all atheists polled. Let's say even if you had 100 atheists, let's just say that you did that. That's like nothing. That's a nothing study. But still, if you had that and all 100 agreed that that we live in a God-free universe, at least you'd have something. But you don't have that. So you can't make this statement at all with just, it's an empty assertion. It's just nothing is there to support it. Anyways, okay. So that's all. Back to the thing here.
So we have two competing claims about the identity of the universe in which we live. The atheist likes to jeer that Christians ask him to prove that God doesn't exist, which is impossible for him, because he can't prove a negative. Sometimes he will get shifty and claim that by proclaiming himself an atheist, he's only saying that God isn't a scientific concept, and so there can be no scientific evidence for God.
What? Who's claiming that? This is another straw man. Like, can you show me, give me at least one person that said that? It would still, then you would be rebuttaling potentially that one person, but not all eight. I mean, just, whatever. Just, since there's no video on this, I guess I'll just mute myself and play that video, not switch. Whatever. I don't know what I'm doing.
Therefore, he doesn't have enough information to make a decision regarding God's existence, and so he reasonably abstains from making that decision. Despite that being a description of an agnostic, rather than an atheist, it is tantamount to an admission by the atheist that, by his own standards, he has no evidence to refute God's existence.
Well, in your construct straw man, with a awfully huge red herring thrown in for good measure, I guess you'd be right. But since it is a construct straw man, then you're wrong. The whole agnostic thing. Look, I know you don't understand what that word is. It is a huge tangent from this. I made a video a long time ago. You're not atheist, you're agnostic. And my conclusion in that video is basically, it doesn't matter. It doesn't change anything. Whatever you want to call me, I don't care. I call myself skeptic. So what do you got? It doesn't matter what you call me, doesn't matter what label you want. It's still, I don't believe in your God because you haven't demonstrated it. Not only have you not demonstrated it, no one has, and God hasn't. But this is interesting. Yeah, it's not our position that there's no scientific evidence for God. It's usually, as this person just said, Dan. I can't pronounce that name. I'm gonna say cat loves me. I'm thinking it's Dana. Okay. Anyways, the cat loves them. So, but yeah, that's correct. It's the theist position. If in fact I made a video about that. That there can't be any proof of God if God is supernatural. It's supernatural by the definition of what that word means. That there isn't evidence of it. The minute you have evidence of it, then it would be natural. So there couldn't be evidence of God ever if God is supernatural. That's it. That's the end of that, thing. But again, it doesn't matter. Even if your God isn't supernatural, great. You okay? Just give me the dang evidence. It doesn't. None of this helps me to not to stop not believing in your God, and you haven't given me any reason to think that I'm wrong in my position because you're not challenging my position even a little.
What he is saying is that he lacks evidence, acceptable by his own standards, that we live in universe B, even as he makes the positive claim that we live in universe B.
It's not my standards, but again, he's arguing against a straw man construct, so he's not really arguing against any particular evidence or evidence. He's not arguing against any atheist, let alone arguing against evidence. What's that about? I'm glad I can edit this video. No, we're not claiming. Again, we're not claiming that we're in this godless universe or whatever. Although that does appear to be the case. If there's a God, it's so well hidden that I can't believe that it's there. So, and if it is there, I can't tell the difference between this universe and a universe with God. The thing is, this apologist, like many, is not going to present, try to look at it from both sides. Or although I do that. Like, okay, well, what would this universe look like without a God? Would it look identical to the universe that it's already here? What would the universe look like with a God? And which God are we talking about? Like, if we're going to insert different God concepts, well, then how would that change the picture of the universe? Or would it at all? And if it doesn't, then if the two are identical, then there's no sense in this sort of assertion that well, you can't show that the universe is not this way. Well, yeah, but you can't either. So now what? And in regards to this assertion that that is my standard. Well, I think that this goes to epistemology. Like, what is the standard that we should use to decide whether something is true or not? And could you talk about that somewhat? But I mean that's not going to be what he does in this video. So
atheists, those self-proclaimed paragons of reason and rationality, mistakenly believe that those pesky Christians are asking them to prove that God does not exist. But in actuality, those atheists are being asked to produce evidence that we live in the universe in which they claim we live.
Wait, what? Did he just say what I think he just said? Atheists are being asked to prove that we live in the universe that we live in? Let me go back.
Claimed paragons of reason and rationality mistakenly believe that those pesky Christians are asking them to prove that God does not exist. But in actuality, those atheists are being asked to produce evidence that we live in the universe in which they claim we live.
Okay. So, produce evidence that we live in the universe that atheists claim we live in. I claim that we live in this universe, and the evidence that we live in this universe is that we live in this universe. As far as evidence that Yahweh doesn't exist, I've got lots of that. Uh, but I mean, that would require an entire, maybe a separate video. But I'll just say the short version, which is that the evidence I have that Yahweh isn't is the fact that there is no evidence that Yahweh is, plus all the examples and counterexamples to Yahweh that I'm familiar with and I know of. There's no empirical evidence, there's no repeatable test, and so far, no valid and sound argument for Yahweh's existence, let alone any other God's existence that I know of. So I have to suspend belief on those. I have to doubt those. But with Yahweh, I'm more prone to say no, that can't be, at least not the Yahweh that many Christians have tried to promote and say that is. Now, maybe Yahweh is a slightly different way, but the sort of Yahweh that many apologists offer is an incoherent being that offers illogic as a way to force you to think it is or isn't. And so for that reason, I'd have to doubt it, because an illogical being cannot exist at all unless they're willing to say that God is illogical, and in that case, why should I trust it at all? But he's not done straw manning the atheist position, so
If supporting their positive claim with actual evidence requires them to prove a negative, that is their problem.
No, that's your problem for not understanding how basic logic functions.
They are making a truth claim about our universe, for which they cannot offer any empirical support.
No, we're not. Stop straw manning us. But even if this is the case, you can't provide any empirical evidence for your side. So all this video would come down to would be a 2Q. It's a two, or sometimes I say 2Q because I'm not sure exactly how I'm supposed to say that word. But anyways, it's a U2. Well, yeah, I don't have evidence, and neither do you. Okay, nobody has evidence. Now what? Okay, well then why should we believe if we don't have evidence? Sounds like if neither you or I have evidence, then we should doubt. So that's a good reason to be a skeptic, isn't it?
Yet by some inscrutable, irrational twists of logic on the part of atheists, their inability to support their own claim, in a manner that measures up to their own standards, is somehow a demonstration of the weakness of the Christian claim, that we live in universe A.
Okay, so you don't know what my standards are, or any other atheist standards are, but mine are actually really simple: empirical evidence, repeatable test, and or a valid and sound argument. Any of those three things make me be able to think that something is true. So yes, there is a huge amount of empirical evidence for the universe we have. There's lots of different tests that we can run, and there are valid and sound arguments, although we don't even really need them at this point. There's evidence that the universe is 54 was it billion years old. Now I got to make sure that that's right. I know that they were thinking that 13 billion years old. That's right. 4.54 billion years Earth. I'm sorry. My brain just doesn't want to do anything today. So 13 billion years for the universe. And then there's evidence that the Earth is 4.54 billion. But or million, or jeez. Yeah, billion. No, I was right. Anyways, they don't have any proof of anything so far. So even if this is true, so what? So we can't support this claim. But I can support the claim that the universe is the way it is by empirical evidence and a repeatable test and a valid and sound argument. I can show I can show you the science that shows us that the Earth is 4.54 54 billion years, and the universe is 13 billion years old, and that biological evolution is actually correct. And I say all that because this is, again, a creationist who denies those things or some aspect of those things. So, as far as there not being a God, well, again, I can show that by the fact that there's no evidence that there is. And just saying, well, lack of evidence is absence of evidence is an evidence of absence. Well, yeah, that's true, but it also doesn't really help you. So I actually can do what he says I can't do. So,
since by his own admission, his claim that we live in universe B lacks any evidence that meets his own standards, it follows that he can only believe his claim on faith. All the Christian is
okay, so I always ask this whenever this comes up, because of course it's a true clue. It's a you as well. Well, you have faith. Okay, well, is faith good or bad? Because you have faith, and you're claiming I have faith. Okay, is faith good or bad? Now, if you say it's good, then there's nothing wrong with it. And if you say it's bad, well, then we should have as little faith as possible, which is a great argument for being a skeptic.
Asking is that the atheist support his claim that we live in universe B. That's it. As a Christian, I would like to know what evidence the atheist has that we live in his universe, rather than mine.
Shifting burden of proof 101.
I would truly like to correctly understand which sort of universe I live in. If the atheist can offer me evidence that my claim that we live in universe A is wrong, I would like to be presented with that evidence.
You have the burden, not us. It's interesting. Like, I'll still believe this until you show me that I'm wrong. No, really, you should be willing to be wrong and say, well, here's different ways that I could be wrong. Here's my ideas. What possible way could I negate these? And see, not believing in a God is, let's say, a starting position. I'm just going to say that I don't know, is my starting position. And then I'm going to go from there to try to find out how reality works. Well, what am I going to do? I'm going to come up with science eventually as a way to figure, as a filtering mechanism to try to figure out how things work, right? And at what point during my exploration of the universe am I going to find God? The only place I'm going to find God is in the claims of other humans and the claims of religions. I'm not going to find it just looking at the world and the universe that we live in, because apparently, for whatever reason, God is, well, claimed to be not visible by many theists. So I would never be able to find God since it's invisible. So rather than shifting the burden of proof to me, you need to provide the proof that you have a God in the first place. That's all you need to do, and then I won't be an atheist anymore. I probably will still be a skeptic, but I won't be, Anyways.
Instead, the atheist can only present me with his faith. And if my faith is not good enough evidence for him, why should his be good enough for me?
Well, no faith should be good enough for anybody. But if we both have faith and you realize at some level that faith isn't good, then what can we do to get rid of faith? Well, let's doubt that there is a God. Okay. Does that mean that there's no God? No, we can also doubt that. Well, what does that mean? Then that means we don't know either way. And that makes us a skeptic or agnostic or whatever the hell word you want. I don't care. Doesn't matter. Then what? That's better because, well, now we don't know. We're just like, well, I don't know if there is or isn't a God. Great. All right. Well, now what? Well, let's just look at the universe and figure out what's going on. That sounds like an interesting thing to do. Let's just set aside the God question because we can't resolve it. Not, well, you can't prove you're right, so I'm just going to dig in my heels. Well, if neither person can prove that they're right, then you must be skeptical of both conclusions.
But let's back up a minute. Is the atheist correct that he cannot empirically prove God's existence, because God is beyond the scientific method? First of all, I contend that it is not possible for human beings to know what they don't yet know. There should be nothing controversial about this contention. Indeed, I can't believe that anyone would regard it as anything other than a truism. Therefore, just because an atheist has not yet conceived of an acceptable scientific experiment, or of some way to empirically demonstrate God's existence to his own satisfaction, that doesn't mean that God does not exist.
That's correct, but do you think that there's a way that we can scientifically show that God exists? And what is that way? And do you have it? If you don't, then who cares?
To say, God hasn't come down and shaken my hand, therefore he doesn't exist, is not a logically sound statement.
It kind of is, depending on what God is supposed to be. The fact that God hasn't come down to shake my hand, it does negate some God claims. A God that wants to have a relationship with me has to be a thing that I can't deny or can't ignore. Okay. So, for example, I got my friend Gary Wishton here. I know that he exists. I don't have a choice in that. I know he exists. I've seen him on camera. I've talked to him. He's talked to me. And therefore I can have a relationship with him. Or I could choose not to. Well, there's no reason I would, I don't think, but I mean, he loves dogs, but I'm not going to hold that against him, dogs should be squished to death, but that's okay. I don't like dogs. You might not like that I don't like dogs, and that's okay. But I exist without a doubt. So you can choose to have a relationship or not with me. But the fact that God hasn't made itself known to me in the same way that Gary has means I can't decide whether or not I want a relation with God. So God must not be a being that actually wants a relationship with me, or it doesn't have the power to do that. In other words, it doesn't have the power to reveal itself to me so that I would know that it's there. So, and then another or it doesn't exist. Well, actually, it's just be an or it doesn't exist, I guess, because it wouldn't be those anyway. So it's one of those. So a God that wants a relationship with me does not exist because plus a God that wants a relationship with me and has the power to reveal itself to me doesn't exist because it hasn't done that. That is a logical inference, and it is a logical argument. The only way around that is to say, well, that God either doesn't want a relationship with me or doesn't have the power. That's it. That's the only way out of that. So if your God concept is a different one, that's like, well, this God concept wants a relationship with you, has the power to show itself to you, but has all these other loopholes that you have to jump through because of reasons, then that God is still not one that has shown itself to me at all, let alone shown itself to the rest of humanity. So I have to doubt it until it does. And that is perfectly logical.
God's non-existence is not demonstrated, simply because he has not come down to earth and worked a miracle in your life, or because you can't point to him and say, there's God, that's God over there. The alleged incompatibility of God with science is not demonstrated simply because we allegedly haven't yet found a stamp on our DNA that says, God was here, 4400 BC.
Why would it say 4400 BC? It would say like a lot longer than that ago that humans came into existence. But yeah, again, this is great. But wouldn't it be amazing if our DNA did say made by, whatever? That would be something to go on at least. But we don't have that. So, that's a problem. But it's, again, are you suggesting there is some scientific way to find God? Then what is it?
Just because an atheist claims that a scientific experiment that tests for God has not yet been conceived, does that mean one cannot be developed?
No, but it's up to you to develop it, not up to us.
Of course not. The claim that God is incompatible with science is either true, or it is a limitation of human intellect in designing scientific tests, or it is a lack of desire to attempt to design such tests.
Every single test that has been attempted on God, souls, spirits, and or other supernatural claims has yielded results that we would expect from chance or nature itself. So they've yielded no result that at all. So prayer tests have not been shown to do anything significant. There was a doctor I remember reading about ages ago that thought that he had found proof of the soul because he weighed people's bodies right before they died, and then he weighed them after they died, and then it was like they lost some weight, and so he calculated. But the problem was, of course, his experiment was extraordinarily flawed. Like the weight scale on the beds wasn't very accurate, and he was maybe putting his hand on it, and then he wasn't accounting for liquids lost or just the amount of air in a body, or there's all these other things that he wasn't accounting for. It wasn't controlled test or anything like this, so the result was null and void. And so nobody bothered to follow it up with another test that I know of. And that would be on the theist to do. That would be their burden. But every single time that it's been attempted, it has failed. And what's interesting about the Yahweh character is there's actually quite a big dilemma for the apologist, at least the apologist that thinks that the Bible is true or inerrant, because and also thinks that God doesn't change, because there's a whole battle between God and Baal, and the people pray to Baal and the people pray to Yahweh, and there's these altars, one altar for Baal, one altar for Yahweh. I brought this up with S.J. Thomason. I said, okay, can we do this test again? Well, maybe. I'm like, well, let's say yes or no here. Let's have an actual answer. And the thing is, apologists won't answer if we can do this test again, because I think that they kind of know at some level, or suspect at any rate, that the test would not produce any result. You can't test God, they'll say. But God was cool with being tested before, but that was just a special time and a special circumstance, so we can't do the same test again. Why not? God doesn't change. Oh, but he does. It's like, okay, well, So if you could show something, anything, that'd be great, but you don't have it. It's not up to us, it's up to you.
Unless a list of all scientific experiments that have, or ever can, be conceived and or performed, can be immediately produced by the atheist, then the aforementioned truism eliminates the first of the three possibilities just mentioned, leaving only the two.
No.
The claim of God's incompatibility with science is merely either a limitation of human intellect in designing scientific tests, or else it is a lack of desire to do so. Therefore, there is no reason to believe that an atheist could not prove to his own standards that his claim is correct, and we live in universe B.
But no, you you can't have it both ways. So we exhaust every single possible thing that we can possibly think of to test for God scientifically. The best we could do is say, well, I guess that if there's a God, it is beyond the reach of science right now. And that would be that. And that wouldn't show that there isn't a God, but it wouldn't show that there is either. So we still don't have proof that there is God, but we also don't have proof that there isn't. At least, that's not how it works. I mean, that's not how science works either, by the way. You start with the hypothesis that your idea is wrong and work to disprove it. You don't work to prove it. Jeez.
By his own admission, he has not yet done so. He simply asserts that there is no scientific evidence for God, and that there never can, or will be.
That's not an assertion that the atheist makes, again. It's actually the assertion that many theists have made throughout the years and throughout the ages. And it's an assertion that is based solely upon that God is a supernatural being. Because, again, supernatural by its own definition is not natural. And science deals only and solely in the natural because that's all we know about. We don't know of any other thing, so there would be no way to test that. And if you want to say, well, there is this other thing, great. Then you need to demonstrate it, and the burden is still on you.
So not only does he presently believe the truth of his claim on faith alone, he believes that all he will ever have is faith.
Nope.
If the atheist can't prove that we live in universe B, then it is just as likely that we live in universe A.
No, that's not how that works, because you can't decide a likelihood with both. If you and your opponent both have conclusions that cannot be proven, then there is no likelihood of either one being correct at all. That value doesn't exist. Okay? So I'll give I hate to do analogies because there's always a way to pick apart an analogy. But, okay, so let's say you and I are debating about whether or not a jar full of marbles, or at least we think it's full of marbles, it has an even or odd amount of marbles in the jar. We don't know. We don't know that it's full of marbles. We just see that there's marbles in there. So maybe there's something in the jar besides marbles. So that kind of negates our ability to make some sort of estimate, based on the jar size and things like this that you could do if it was actually full of marbles. Or maybe some of the marbles are different sizes, whatever. So we don't have complete knowledge. But we want to just, one of us is going to be right. Either it's an even number or it's an odd number. Okay, great. Well, I can't prove that there isn't an odd number of marbles, but you can't prove that there is an odd number of marbles, because for what in this scenario, we're not allowed to just count the marbles. Okay, we have to keep it in the jar, and we're not allowed, and it's like, well, you have to get maybe you could count all the marbles that you could see, but then there's marbles on the backside, and you're not allowed to look, or something like that. But like I said, analogies are difficult. But the point is, there wouldn't be a way to show who is right without actually counting the marbles, and you're not allowed to do that. And so the position would not be, well, both are plausibly true, or either one could be true. No, only one is true. And you don't know which one is true. You don't know if it's an even number. You don't know that it's an odd number. And it's not that both are plausibly true. It's that you don't even know which one is true. But one is true at the end of the day. You just don't know which one it is. So you can't give it a 50-50 thing. That's a false dichotomy. I guess a different analogy, I'd say, let's say that you and I were debating on whether there's a light on in a room or not, and the room is sealed. You can't can't see through the door at all. There's no cracks. There's no way. It's a locked door. We can't go in. There's no windows. And, we don't have the ability to measure whether or not there's power being drained, or maybe it's just a candle. But nonetheless, the claim is that there's a light in the room. Can we decide whether there is or isn't a light? No, we can't. Neither one of us has enough information to deduce if there is or isn't. You could bet, you could guess, but you couldn't ever know who is right until you just open the door and find out. And it is until that moment you do not know. And you couldn't say, well, either one's possible. No. Well, yeah, I mean, in a way, either one's possible, but it's not equivalent to saying that they're both equally plausible. Because one is going, well, I guess in that situation would be, but one is going to turn out to be, these analogies suck. I'm not going to do an analogy. Just pretend that I didn't do an analogy at all. And, that was just, okay, no, I've got it. Okay. There is a dragon, or there isn't a dragon. And because we can't prove that there isn't a dragon, then it's just as plausible that there is a dragon, right? No, it's not. It's not plausible at all. Okay, there's the actual analogy that I used.
Based on the preceding, the atheist believes that the Christian will likewise never be able to prove God exists in a manner that is scientifically acceptable to the atheist.
I mean, I'm open to what evidence you have, but so far you haven't produced any. So what you got?
So what we're left with is this. I can't prove to the atheist that we live in universe A, and he can empirically prove neither to himself, nor to me, that we live in universe B. I admit I have faith. The atheist doesn't admit that he has faith. Unless and until the atheist can admit to himself that he has faith, he will never see that the clash between atheism and Christianity is not a clash between science and the supernatural, between reason and irrationality, but a clash between two faiths.
Wow. So what? Even if that was true, all this is a true quiz. Even if that was the case, that doesn't help you at all. It's like, oh, I have to admit this. Okay, let's just say tentatively, for the sake of argument, that I'm like, well, yeah, okay, sure. Yeah, all right. I admit that. Now what? Now what do we do? Because you still don't have evidence. So why should I believe you? If you're saying, well, you don't have evidence either, why should I believe you? Well, then we should not believe either one, and that means we have to be a skeptic, which then leads to not believing in God. So that makes me doubly right.
Arguments between atheists and Christians can never be won, because the atheist does not understand what is being argued over.
No, it's because you don't even understand how to argue in the first place. That's like one problem. Yes, you can win if you had a valid and sound argument. You don't.
The problem for the atheist is that when asked, what does a universe with a God look like? The Christian will answer, it looks like the one in which we live. And when asked, what does a universe without a God look like? The atheist will give the same answer.
Yeah, that is a problem, but it's a problem for you, because I would actually expect the universe to look a lot different, depending on what God you're claiming, though. So, but yeah.
In order to show that the Christian is wrong, the atheist must demonstrate irrefutably and precisely how a Christian universe would not look like the universe in which we live.
No, stop shifting the burden of proof. He can do this by
demonstrating.
No, you're shifting the burden of proof. That's all you're doing.
either that something that should exist in a Christian universe doesn't, or that something that shouldn't exist in a Christian universe does. Likewise, to show that the atheist is wrong, the Christian must demonstrate irrefutably and precisely how an atheist universe would not look like the universe in which we live. He can do this by demonstrating either that something that should exist in an atheist universe does not, or that something that shouldn't exist in an atheist universe does.
That's kind of incoherent, but sure, what do you got? Do you have any of that? Do you have that? Please just tell me the thing. Show me the thing that would... I don't even know what that means, the atheist universe, but whatever. Okay, do you have that?
1. What should exist in universe A? God and the results of his actions in the universe. 2. What shouldn't exist in universe A? The lack of a God. 3.
What?
What should exist in universe B? The lack of a God. 4. What shouldn't exist in universe B? God and the results of his actions in the universe. The atheist doesn't believe the answer to any of these questions can be demonstrated.
That's a rather incoherent. I mean, I don't even think you got your list correct, but just okay. So, what would we expect to see in a universe with this God versus what we would expect to see in a universe without a God? I don't know. I guess in Christianity, I suppose you would say miracles. Miracles exist in the Christian universe, right? Like, so all you'd have to do is show one of those, and then that would be something to go on. But you can't do that, and you won't do that, so that's a problem for you, not for me, though.
So on what basis does he believe that he lives in universe B?
I don't believe
Faith
anything,
alone,
so...
Of course.
Of course.
Meanwhile, the Christian believes the answer to 1 can, and absolutely has, been demonstrated. I've shown why the atheist is logically incorrect in claiming that his answer to 4 is something that is not demonstrable.
No, you haven't shown that because your argument is so incoherent. Is nothing but a 2Q construct straw man and shifting burden of proof. That's it. That's what your argument is. You don't even have an argument. And there's no syllogism. I mean, come on. You can put words on this, but no, I mean, can't you display other words other than just this on the screen? Couldn't you give us a syllogism? No, that would be a lot to ask for. Okay, what?
The atheist is therefore left with the task of demonstrating why God and his actions in the universe have not already been demonstrated, and never can be demonstrated.
What?
Pretending for the sake of argument that he has done the former, he has yet to do the latter.
What?
Again pretending for the sake of argument that I can't prove we live in universe A.
You can't.
And have only my faith that we do.
You do.
And since the atheist, wrongly, claims that God is beyond science, and thus can't empirically show that we live in...
Okay, is God not beyond science? Because again, this isn't my claim. This is usually the theist claim. So, what is your claim?
Universe B, then at the very least, there is no empirically demonstrable fact of the matter, as to which universe we live in.
Right, so we should doubt both.
This would seem to suggest that we should consider the possibility that we live in an agnostic universe.
Okay.
A universe C, as it were.
Sure.
Unfortunately for atheists, we couldn't possibly live in such a deistically indeterminate universe.
Why not?
Regardless of whether or not humans have the capability of detecting God and or his works, we definitely live in either A or B.
Well, maybe not. This is an interesting dichotomy that comes up sometimes. Either there is a God or there isn't. Well, maybe there was a God, but it died in order to create the universe. Like, it exploded itself to make the universe. So now there isn't a God, but there once was. So you would say what? Well, we live in a godless universe, but there was a god at one point. It just died. It exploded to make the universe. So what would that be? Or maybe there's no god yet, but one day we become god. Like we're able to make a new universe of our own making, and I suppose that would make us god at some level. But what is a god anyway? That's kind of a tricky question that theists tend to avoid. Is it just something that's able to make a universe? Or like is there more requirements to be a god than just making a universe? Because again, at some hypothetical point, if your technology is advanced enough, maybe your species could make a universe. If that's all it's required to be God, then you're God at that point. If it's more than that, then whatever.
A reality where God's existence is indeterminate is impossible, so there is no third option.
Sure there is. I just said a third option. Besides that, it's not about whether there is or isn't a God. It's about whether or not we could believe or not believe in a God. If we were to take your entire incoherent argument as being tenable to any level, then we would have to say, well, we're going to live as if we're in universe C, regardless to whatever the fact might be, because we cannot determine if we're in universe A or B. So until we can determine one way or the other, then the only option is to be a skeptic, which is, I guess, is universe S. Almost done.
There is no universe C, other than, perhaps, in the wishful thinking of the anti-creationist.
What?
This audio production is copyright 2020 by Scott Reeves.
Okay. All right. Well, that was interesting. Just for added fun. Here's something decided to play automatically. I just wanted to show Scott Reeves' YouTube channel here. Woo! Okay, this guy is nuts. Pure and simple. He's off his rocker. He thinks that he has a case against Einstein, whatever that means, and a case for geocentricity. Wow. 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 Okay, so no to all that. The burden is upon you. It's always been upon you. It will continue to be upon you. And I just realized that the last time he made a video was 4 years ago on that channel. So maybe I'm responding to a really old video, but whatever at this point. He had nothing but nonsense to offer. And for that reason, we should be very extraordinarily skeptical of his claim. Link to the original video in the description. Please give it a dislike if you don't like that content. And if you do like this content, then like it. And let people know that I exist. Because, I want a relationship with people. And, if you don't know that I exist, then I don't blame you for not having a relationship with me. And, if you do know that I exist but don't want a relationship with me, that's fine. But we could still you can still comment on my stuff or whatever. Okay, this is the time in the video that I start to be incoherent. So it's time to hit the button. Good night, everybody, or good day, depending on your time zone. And